Welcome to the HR Think Tank, our podcast that uncovers the power a trusted workforce has on team performance, culture, and morale. We gather insights from experts, business leaders, and HR professionals to help you lead your team more effectively. Here's your host, Kai No, CEO of Verify Now, a trusted provider of background screening services.
Recent research published in US science journal Nature shows that children living in areas with friendships that cut across class lines earn more in adulthood. In other words, friendships between rich and poor can have a big impact on wealth equality. Impact and equality through social networking is at the center of everything that today's guest does. Tuan Pham is an expert in corporate social responsibility, having worked in related roles for Heineken, the World Bank, and Booking.com, and now in his current role as Head of Social Impact APAC at LinkedIn. We're thrilled to have him on the show and learn more about closing the network gap and how we can all make a difference. Welcome to the show, Tuan.
Thanks for having me, Kai.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. We've had a number of chats throughout the years, and now we're here together in person having a chat. So I really appreciate that. So Tuan, you're a leader at LinkedIn, where you have not only an impact on the team around you, but on society, on the communities that you interact with. But I want to go back in time and look at your leadership journey, because your focus right now is social impact, right? But how did you get to be where you are today? I'd love to just go back and, please share with us the personal journey that you've had.
I mean, I'd say much like any of us, it all begins with our parents, Kai. Right? So, a bit about my background. My parents, Vietnamese migrants, they came over to Australia in 1972. Dad was part of one of the first cohorts of what was called the Colombo program. And he was part of 60 students that came over. And he was probably some of the first Vietnamese people ever in Australia. Yeah. There weren't Vietnamese people back in Australia in 72. So that's where it came from. Mum and Dad, they were both scholars. They came over, they worked really hard in order to get this opportunity. And so the foundation of that and everything in my life when I grew up was about how do we work hard to create opportunity for ourselves. And myself and my sister, like many other families, really focused on study. Can't say I was the best student. In fact, I wasn't, and we can get into that. But the importance of really having focus and then really putting ourselves into the best opportunities possible. I think from that, I've had what you could call a pretty non-traditional pathway actually to where I am now. Because of the networks and knowledge and skills that I had from my parents and where I grew up, and we can get into that. I did start my journey in the government.
Yeah, okay.
And sometimes I joke about working for the Australian government as being boring. Yeah. But I learned so much there. Good governance, how governments make decisions on policies and programs and how it affects the communities that they're trying to work for. I did that for a while. Then I actually left the government, ended up in Vietnam for a year, working for a non-profit, not making any money, which was a bit of a shock to my parents, who also, worked so hard and encouraged us to study so hard so that we could, have security going forward. Yeah. And I basically went from a pretty good paying government job to earning nothing. Did that, but I learned so much, Kai, in that journey. I spent a year in Vietnam learning about working at a grassroots level with nonprofits and communities. After that, I ended up moving to the Netherlands. And so my journey takes another turn. And I went there to pursue my master's because I wanted to learn more about impact. Yep. I'd learned a bit about government. I'd learned a bit about nonprofits. And I really wanted to say, okay, what else is out there in this great wide world? How am I going to make my impact on society? Ended up in the Netherlands, ended up doing internships where I was getting paid $500 a month. So I was also, I would say basically making nothing. Yeah. And so the journey was sort of a bit strange, where I sort of was up and down. I came into these new countries, new areas where I knew nothing. And I sort of had to build it up again from scratch. I think from there, I was also, just jumping at different opportunities that provided themselves. Ended up getting some great work experience in some great companies in the Netherlands, working for nothing, $500 a month. Yep. But that was the stepping stone to where I am now. Because from there, I learned about how corporations, companies make impact on the world.
Yeah.
I learned about scale from a technology perspective. I took all those learnings to help me get where I am now at LinkedIn, leading social impact in APAC.
Yeah, because one of the things that we wanted to talk about on today's show is about the network gap specifically, and where you were born, who your friends are, who you go to school with, who your family is, and the impact that it has on your life trajectory, right?
Absolutely.
And what I love about your story is how you were courageous enough to take these bold moves. Because I think it's quite bold going from a government job, the Australian government in Australia, and going to working for nothing, pro bono in Vietnam. And then again, taking the plunge to then create a whole new network system there, and then going to the Netherlands. And then I know from the Netherlands, you ended up having a job with the World Bank in the US. And again, that is, and what you've done today is you've just expanded your geographic reach in all these different communities. And you are where you are today because of these decisions, right? So I think it's very courageous, but I want to drill down on that. Like, how did you come to that decision to go, yep, all right, I'm going to leave my safety net and I'm going to go somewhere else? Like, I know your parents left Vietnam, came here under the New Colombo. So you had some precedent already from your parents, but just from you though, because like you could have had that comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, let's hone in on the network piece again. The decisions that I've been able to make in my life and my career, whether right or wrong, are largely influenced by the knowledge from my networks. So, I mean, let's go right to the start. I started working in government. That was my first job. Before interviewing for that job, I leaned on my network. I grew up in Canberra, right? So I'm part of that. I'm born in Canberra, so I have that particular opportunity to learn about government. My parents worked for the government. So when I had an interview, I lean on my network and my mum says, you know what? I'm going to teach you how to interview for a public service government position. Now, if I'm not part of that network, that changes my opportunity. And then, you know what? I found out a friend that I went to school with got the job that I was applying for the year before. So I sent him a message, right? His name was Adam. I said, Adam, I'm applying for this job that I know you got last year in the same department. Do you have any tips or advice on how I can best prepare myself? So then once I have that, because of my network, opens up that opportunity. And then the flow-on effects for all other decisions. I decided to leave government and go to Vietnam because my sister and her now husband, who of course are part of my personal network, started to tell me about the experiences that they had on a program volunteering in Cambodia. And I'll tell you what, when I was working for government, I had never even thought about that. And all of a sudden my sister sits me down at dinner and she says, hey, have you heard about this opportunity? And that opportunity came about because she told it to me, not because I knew about it or I found it. Similarly, decision to study and move to the Netherlands, I spoke to a lot of people. I said, hey, I want to work in impact and I want to make a positive impact in the work I do. But my experience so far is really only in government. It's not in the non-profit or the community space. And a lot of people would advise me, why don't you learn more about it? Why don't you study? And so that feeds into, everything I do. And I honestly say that all the decisions are heavily influenced by the people in my network, the way that I ask things, the way that I take it in. And Kai, I was telling you the story, and I'm going to just backtrack a bit now, a little bit, go on a bit of a tangent, because I'm thinking about my father. And I told you, he came to Australia. He didn't know anyone. He didn't speak English. Literally no networks, like new country, no language, anything, no knowledge. And I think I was telling you about, he saved his first amount of money. He wanted to buy a car. He's a cool 20-something-year-old. He even had long hair back then. And he's probably thinking, I'm going to have an awesome car, drive around and be cool. And someone in his network, an Australian gentleman, his name's Ian, gave him advice. Said, at this point in time, you can put that money in a car or you could invest it in property. And he listened to Ian. And that completely changes, your trajectory. And he had no idea. He didn't have a father in Australia. He didn't understand the financial system. He didn't understand how to apply for jobs. And then through connecting with other people, he was able to leverage that advice to connect him to more opportunities. And so I guess, and he's always told myself and my sister that story growing up.
Yeah.
So we always ask.
We rely on the kindness of the people that we know, but also the kindness of the people we don't know who have our best intentions at heart. And that's why I'm really excited about today's episode, because the work that you're doing at the moment is about closing the network gap. So there's this initiative, and we're going to ask you more about it because I do want to hear. But first, I want to touch on this article that you shared with us. It's a New York Times article. It's about the vast new study shows key to reducing poverty is more friendships between rich and poor.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because I draw it back to my own experience. So, I grew up in Southwest Sydney, in Bankstown, and my network was very limited as well. Going to high school, very much with my family, blue collar. My mum was sick, so she never worked. We had family and friends, but she didn't have any professional networks. And it wasn't until I was 16, I was volunteering at the local PCYC, where the police officer, traditionally who my family didn't have the best run-ins with, was the one that took me upon his wing and gave me some friendly advice and said, Kai, why don't you consider this, or this? And he actually opened doors for me. I didn't ask for it, but he saw something and he gave me those opportunities.
Right.
So this was a stranger that I did not know.
Yeah.
And we're still friends today. This is, almost 20 years later, and we're still friends because we opened that door. But let's talk about this article, because there were some fascinating things that I found in there. And, one quote that I'll say is, this is from the article itself. Yeah. Researchers say economic connectedness is a better predictor of a community's upward mobility than any other characteristic studied yet. So this is about income mobility. This is about rich and poor blending in. And I was talking about this with our other guest earlier around how when you isolate yourself into communities who just look like you and are you, that actually doesn't breed or generate social capital. That is for the well-being of everyone in the world, right? So I'd like to get your input on this article that you shared with us. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, and again, you heard me say it, how important networks are, and opening up outside, this circle that we grow in to get other perspectives, other opportunities. Yeah. I think the article is spot on. Yeah. I think if we stay in a bubble and we don't learn about other worlds, we're limiting ourselves. We're limiting the ideas that we can be this or we can do that. We're limiting the knowledge that even exists. And so then it just continues to narrow our focus, and it narrows our community where they're sort of stuck in their own bubble. Yeah. And they're not being lifted up by other opportunities. Yeah. This is I guess a pretty silly example, but it's something I experienced lately. I returned to Australia, after about 8 years living abroad. And honestly, I had no idea what, let's say, a salary expectation should be in Australia. Yeah. I had zero idea. And when I moved to a new job at LinkedIn, I literally had to lean on my network. I said, I don't know what to ask for. Yeah. I know what to ask for here and here and here. Yeah. I have no idea what I'm doing in Australia. And if I had no one to ask, what happens, and you expand that to different families in different situations where you are in this bubble and you only know this one thing, you don't know what should be available to you. You don't know what your opportunities are. And then those decisions you make can have long-lasting impacts on your family. Yeah. Right? And your opportunities down the future. So I think it's spot on. And I think it's so important to just connect across communities. Yeah. Learn about, how other people approach life. I think there's a social element, there's fun, there's community, there's friendships. But then just understanding, of course, how people are able to find opportunities and get success. Yeah. Because it makes you think about other ways, right? Yeah.
It's true. You learn from other people. One thing that I missed is I should have got you to tell us more about what is the network gap. What's the definition, and tell us a bit more about your initiative at LinkedIn, what you guys are doing about it. What do you have in store for the rest of us?
Yeah. So the network gap is the advantage that some have over others as a result of their social professional connections, right? Where you're born, right? If you're born, let's say, in an area where the median income is over 100K, you might be 2 times more likely to have a stronger network. If you go to a well-known school, you're more likely to have a stronger network. If you work for a top company, you're going to have a stronger network for future opportunities. So there's this gap that exists. Now, we know that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity isn't. So how do we make sure that everyone has access to that opportunity? It's connecting them to new networks. It's providing them with knowledge, either through that networks or through programs that we run. And it's giving them a good view on what skills are important to also help them drive to more opportunities. I think LinkedIn's uniquely positioned because, as the largest professional network, whether it's our product, right, how people search for jobs, how people hire, whether it's our company programs. So we invest and we partner with nonprofits. We're really trying to upskill, trying to create new networks for those who are disadvantaged, what we call professionals facing barriers. And then even through our people who, LinkedIn now has over 18,000 staff.
Wow. Globally.
Working on closing the gap in their day-to-day. And they have a really good view and understanding of talent and using their knowledge and their skills to reach out, to coach, to network, to teach others about this. It's really unique position.
It's absolutely fascinating. So why is this important for LinkedIn? Why is it important for LinkedIn to close the gap? And then my follow-up is, what is your role in all of this?
So it's important. So the vision for LinkedIn is create economic opportunity for everyone in the global workforce. That's the vision. And the mission is about connecting the world's professionals to be more successful and more productive. In order to achieve that vision, that's our team plays a big role in that. We focus on that everyone part, right? Even the playing field. It's really important for LinkedIn because if you think about the product itself, the largest professional network, well, professionals include everyone in the workforce. And so the more people that we can help connect to opportunity, leverage networks, leverage skills, upskill, the more they'll engage with LinkedIn, the more that we can help them. So it's really a natural connection to the vision and the mission of the product. And my role, my team specifically, we focus on managing nonprofit partnerships around the region. We look for different partners that are addressing the network gap. Once we find those partners, we invest in them. There's in-kind. We try to provide insights. We try to help boost their programs through, our core asset, which is LinkedIn Learning. And we really just basically try to lift up the underprivileged and underrepresented.
I think it's really important, the work that you do. And I think it's core to what LinkedIn is all about. Certainly when I'm talking to my team, whether they're customer facing or not, I'm always saying to my team, hey guys, grow your network. The people that we have relationships with, connect with them, build these relationships, because it's interesting. And two, you don't know how you're going to help each other now or into the future.
Absolutely.
If you use me and you as an example. So a lot of people don't know this, but I didn't formally meet you, but you came under my radar in 2017 when we actually launched the Australia-Vietnam Leadership Dialogue. But at the time, even though we had selected you, we couldn't get the timing right. I think you had some work restrictions that prevented you. Now, we were fortunate enough in 2019 that you could actually join that cohort, and we did it in Vietnam. And that's how we formally met, and I guess we've stayed in touch. And so if you think about it from a network perspective, that dialogue was all about people-to-people links. And through that, we amplified the network. So even though it was a group of 20 individuals, high impact individuals, the ecosystem that we built around that was much greater than that. And we can see that come into effect today. Australia-Vietnam bilateral relations are really strong. They're trying to grow that further, but it's all based on the people-to-people links. So I'm thinking about experiences like that where you're putting yourself out there and you're doing something a little bit different. It's a completely different network to what you would normally have, because it's a cross section of industry and society. And then when you add in the another country element, that's like a whole nother world. Isn't it?
And you can find so many synergies without even looking for it. Once you become part of this wider network, and obviously shout out to you for, starting ABYLD, it's amazing program, amazing network. I can tell you actually yesterday, I was messaging Jimmy Pham, right? Founder of Kodo. And he was asking for a network connection, regarding, the work that he's doing in Vietnam, and I was able to provide that. And so we would have never have thought of that all those years ago when I started and learned about you and your organization. And even today, that's where we are. I sent that message yesterday. Now I'm sitting with you here today.
I know,
right?
it's pretty amazing. Some of the stories that came out, because Louise starting Viet Harvest as well. I mean, there's so many stories that we can share, and I think the beauty about finding or expanding your network is you get inspiration from different sources.
Yeah.
And although I'm a people person, I like connecting with people because I get this drive, I get this motivation to go, oh my God, you're doing something awesome. What can I do to support you? And then it also dawns on me that I'm like, am I doing what I need to do?
Yeah.
And it challenges me, because then I'm like, you know what? I want to do something awesome too. Like, I tap into my competitive side, but really I'm happy for people because I want to create a better world as well. I don't want to live in a crappy world.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important for us to meet new people, get new perspectives, get new knowledge, be introduced to new inspirations that you would not have considered before. And that's how we create new solutions to problems that we have today or problems that we have tomorrow. I just want to bring something back around this article that you shared with us. And the old adage of, it's not who you know, it's not what you know, but who you know that really matters. And so this is a quote from the article that says, the key to reducing poverty, these cross-class friendships, what the researchers called economic connectedness, had a stronger impact than school quality, family structure, job availability, or a community's racial composition. It's the people that that will open up the opportunities for you.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really powerful reading that, because you can have this mindset where you're like, oh well, it's because of my family, or it's because of my my religion or my background. But
which are also big parts of networks.
They're factors, but they're saying that the biggest impact is the cross-class friendships.
Yeah.
So, in Australia, we don't really talk about classes as much, but when you look at the socioeconomic brackets, right, there are people who don't associate with others.
Right.
And when you don't associate with others, you can villainize or vilify the other.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I'm a big fan of community events and social impact organizations that bring people together. And that includes sport. Right?
Yeah, big time.
That includes sport.
Yeah.
It's not just work.
Yeah, and I think a big thing that this also connects to is representation. Because when you thinking about connecting across different networks, if you're looking at, let's say, an entirely new network outside of where you grew up, if you don't see yourself represented, it's hard for you to imagine yourself, in that role or pursuing this thing. Or, my sister was telling me just last week, she's a barrister. And more often than not, when she walks into the courtroom, she's the only Asian person there.
Yeah.
And that's something that's noticeable, that, she'll have to think about. And that's not something that anyone else has to. And so there's a representation thing there.
Yeah.
But now that she's there, all our younger cousins, younger people in our network, they see her there.
Yeah.
They ask her questions. They see the opportunity. It's a whole new world.
Yeah.
And they can see themselves there, right? So now they can bridge that network a little bit more easy because there's representation.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important, when you're doing this, networking across boundaries, that the representation continues to shine, because it will encourage it more, make people more comfortable doing that, right?
Yeah. Well, trailblazers like yourself doing these different things that others haven't considered of actually make it easier for the next cohort to then say, someone's done it before.
Yeah.
We can do it too. So let's move to the practical part, which is, can you give us some practical tips on expanding your network?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I'll say is just don't be shy. It's really hard to reach out to people.
Yeah.
Strangers, that's really hard to just reach out to a stranger. I think the first step is, you can start slowly, through your own network. You'd be surprised how many people you know, and then get them to maybe connect you to someone through their network so that there's a relationship there. Yeah. I think that takes away a bit of the stress from messaging a random.
Yeah.
I think the second thing to keep in mind is that, and this is a bit of a philosophy of mine, is that people are more willing to help than you realize.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I get messages all the time. People find me on LinkedIn. They might say, hey, I'm interested in a career in social impact, or I'm interested in learning about LinkedIn. I will answer every single message.
You're about to get 1,000 new messages.
I will answer every single message, right?
Yeah.
And if I can't give them a half an hour call because that's not scalable, then I'll say, send me an email with 3 questions, your 3 top questions, and I'll answer it.
Yeah.
And I'll help you if I can. So that's obviously my philosophy, but I think you'd be surprised. Most people are willing to help.
I agree. I mean, that's my view of the world too, and it takes a lot of courage for people to reach out.
Yeah.
And so when I receive those messages, nowhere near as much as you, I'm like, props to this person.
Yeah.
They've put in the effort. I'm more than happy to give it the time because I'm still on the other side. Like I still reach out to people all the time that we don't know. Even for this podcast, we've reached out to a few people, and it's because they're a subject matter expert. They've got really interesting stories. And that fear of rejection is lower than my excitement because I think the benefit, the gain from reaching out and actually getting a positive response is far exceeds any potential rejection, which is temporary.
Absolutely agree.
Right?
And then I'd say the last thing is don't go too hard and too fast.
Spamming.
Well,
people.
no, I wouldn't message you, Kai, as a random, say, hey, Kai, give me a job. Right? I'd ask you maybe, hey, do you have 10 minutes?
Yeah.
You have a really interesting background, Kai, and I'd love to understand how you got there, or if you have any tips on things that I should study that would help me.
Yeah.
And then you'd probably just send me a note, hey, I actually studied this. This helped me get here. Ask for a 10-minute, ask. Or maybe, hey, can we have a quick coffee if you're in the area? Or just a quick Zoom chat. Or if you're busy, I'll send you an email. I just have some really brief questions.
Yeah.
And then always be willing to give.
Yes.
I think it's always important to give something to your network before you need to ask for it.
I agree.
Because when it comes to the point where I go, hey, Kai, I really need your help.
Yeah.
It's so much easier for you to help me because I've given you something.
Yeah. And you've given it freely too.
And you've given it freely because same thing, it's a network effect.
It's true.
Right? And so, don't be shy.
Yeah.
You can start slow through your existing network and get referrals. Don't assume the worst of others. They're probably willing to help you. Don't ask too much.
Too fast, too early.
Too fast. And then and be willing to give just as much as you receive. I mean, they're the first things. And then obviously I'm a bit biased, but you can find tools like LinkedIn or whatever to also search for people who are interesting to follow, to learn from, and then actually message. So you're not just doing a random message.
Yeah.
But there are tools out there.
Yeah, and LinkedIn helps you discover your mutual connections or second connections where you're like, okay, well, this person can potentially, connect me to someone else. And it's all, if you've got good rapport and you've got goodwill with these other people are willing to help. I mean, I say that to my family and my friends all the time is, if you need something, put it out to the universe. Like just early this week, my cousin was saying he was looking for a job, my younger cousin. I'm like, mate, you got to tell the family. You can't just like do your own thing. I'm like, don't be that brave soldier who's going out alone. Like this is a community effort,
Leverage your network, leverage their knowledge.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
And in preparation for our chat today, I actually jumped on. So I'm a UTS alum, right? Yeah. And I jumped on because I got a message from the mentoring platform that they have a couple of weeks ago, and I was meaning to jump on, and I didn't. But in preparation for this, I jumped on last night. I looked at their matches that they gave me and actually reached out and I said, hey, nice to meet you. Here's my name. Looks like we've got this. If you need any assistance with A, B, or C, just reach out, here or LinkedIn. I actually did mention LinkedIn. Yeah. And I did that. So I've put that out back in the universe now if they need that help. The other flip side to the advice is this is more for leaders, but what can leaders do to help their junior staff expand their network?
Yeah. First of all, I'd say encourage your team to network. I mean, there's a real value for their own personal growth, how they even navigate being part of your team. They leverage their network for advice on, how to upskill, how to grow in their role, etc. I'd say also, as much as possible, expose them to other members of the industry. Yeah. It could be outside your industry, but give them a chance to grow through these types of, I would say, industry networking events, connections. Yeah. I always view as well as a leader, the way that you empower and help your team they're not going to be with us forever.
Yeah.
And it's better that you invested in them and help them reach that next step, because while they're still with you, that will pay off spades.
Yeah.
Right? They'll continue to give everything because you're empowering them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really about also connecting them to people through your network that they might be interested in. I think there have been times where in a big organization, sometimes there's a lot of layers.
Yeah.
And junior staff don't have, let's say, the same visibility as others. And so if there's an opportunity with, let's say, a senior level executive, you invite your team member there and you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you an opportunity for visibility. Why don't you lead the meeting?
Yes.
Right? So you find those opportunities, encourage them to take it, encourage them to step up and be confident about it, because that will pay dividends for them in the future.
Yeah, it's a win-win actually, because people upskill, get new experiences, and also decreases your workload potentially. That's a win-win. So Tuan, I've really admired your journey and everything that you've shared to date, right? And I still, your main career has been in corporate social responsibility the last probably 10 years. So why social impact? Like, why do you believe in the work that you do?
I think a lot of it just comes from the way that my sister and I were brought up. We, as a family, would have no success without others helping us. Right? Whether it's advice, don't buy a car, put it in a house, or that same gentleman, Ian, teaching my dad how to apply for a job, teaching my mum about the Australian government system. My dad was actually reflecting with me. He said, the things that we were able to learn as a new migrant would have taken us years and years.
Yes.
But because he helped us, it accelerated us, and therefore he was able to then have opportunities.
Yeah.
And we're nowhere without other people helping us. And so part of who we are and growing up, mum and dad were always really about us giving back. Because we're not here without anyone else.
Yes.
So we need to give back, right? To give others that opportunity. I mean, I remember even, with Vietnam and the refugee camps, my dad spent so much time in those camps because no one in Australia at that time spoke Vietnamese. And he'd been there for a couple of years now. And if no one can teach them or communicate with them, then, it's going to be a tough slog, or tougher than it has to be. Yeah. And so in a similar way that someone gave back to him, he gave back to others. Yeah. And then that's been ingrained in what we do. And then I'd say the last thing is a selfish way to think about it. I get a lot of fulfillment. Like the work that we do really has purpose. I wake up every day and I don't have to think about making money. I get to think about how do we help people. And there's a real beauty in that I'm very lucky, of course. And I can't see myself ever working in another space. Yeah.
That's a really good position to be in. I think this is you calling, like, on the journey that you've had and all the interactions I've had with you. You're just a kind person, and you bring it out in other people as well. And I think that's what the world needs more of. And speaking of what the world needs more of, we may have some listeners on this podcast episode who may not have as much experience in terms of creating social impact in their business or initiatives in the company, the corporates that they have, or maybe their organization's just not as proactive yet compared to someone like LinkedIn. So for an organization that's just starting out their social impact journey, what's a good place to start?
I'd approach it in a couple different ways. First of all, social impact's very broad. It can be about diversity and inclusion. It can be about healthcare. It can be about economic opportunity. It can be about the environment, economic, social, environmental. So there's a lot of different ways that you can think about it. And if you're just starting out, you probably want to find out, firstly, what's most aligned with your business, or where can you provide the most value? You might not have a lot of resources, so that you don't want to give a $10,000 or $50,000 donation, but you might have a product, right? Or you might have skills that you can donate for free to an organization or to a community. And that's not going to cost you a lot. The other thing is, think about the low-hanging fruit You can walk around your office and say, well, why do we have a plastic bottle here? You can minimize things.
Yeah.
And that will probably actually save you money as well, right? Yeah. So look at the low-hanging fruit, look at your office, think about how you operate and what you can reduce in terms of a negative impact.
Yeah.
And then think about your product and what can I do with my product that's not costing a lot, right? But it's relevant to the stakeholders that I work with.
Yeah.
And then I think the third thing that's really powerful is leveraging the passion of your staff.
Yes.
Find out what they're passionate about. Find out what, their sense of purpose is when they wake up. And I think there's a natural thing that you can implement straight away that's cost-free, is that when team members bond, think about bonding over social impact. Think about volunteering. Think about going out to the community. Think about sharing stories about what everyone's passionate about. This is all cost-free, but what it does is it will start getting the organization and all the staff to think about, okay, what impact are we making? And it brings everyone closer together.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. And just to draw out some examples that's happened in our company. So last EPL season, we had a tipping comp and we basically said everyone chips in X amount and the winner will donate it to the charity of their choosing. Now, the person that won, or their team won, she's really passionate about rescuing cats.
Right.
And that's where she ended up contributing. And she loved that she could get this additional sum of money to support her local charity because she volunteers here.
Right.
And then on the other side, when you said, think about low-hanging fruit and your products, well, for us, we're a background screening company, right? So we do background checks, pre-employment checks. And I've tasked my team with a target this year of finding 10 new organizations that we can support through pro bono services.
Right.
And that's on our company objective. Is to do that, because that for us is low hanging fruit. We're a growing company. We don't have the funds that some other larger companies do, but we have services of value.
Yeah.
And that's how we're doing it.
And I would not be surprised at all that through these interactions with the community, you get to also learn, have feedback from these customers who you're providing a free service or doing pro bono, but you'll be able to learn things that actually help build your product in the future. And it starts with, we're helping 10 nonprofits. All of a sudden, the nonprofit segment becomes a huge opportunity for your business.
And for me, look, we're doing that because I worked in not-for-profits for 10 years. So I've been on the other side where funds are challenging to raise, but also the question of compliance and finding trusted people in those roles is problematic. When you don't find the right people and you've taken shortcuts and you hire the wrong person, it has a significant bearing on the reputation of the organization. Absolutely. So that's another reason why we wanted to do it. So you talked about the bottom line having an impact already for business leaders who may say, oh well, getting into social impact is not going to help us as a business. But you've just clearly demonstrated just quickly how that could be turned around. I want to ask you about social impact initiatives and what you think the impact is on employer brand. And also what that means for staff retention and attraction.
A couple of things spring to mind. And I've recently been reading a lot about Gen Z.
Okay.
And Gen Z is being called the generation of purpose, or the purpose generation.
Okay.
And these are our future customers. They're our future employees, future employers even. And they are so focused on supporting and being part of organizations that give back and have purpose. And so that in itself is a clear signal to companies, as Gen Z slowly become a more powerful force. How do we show up for them to get their business or to get their talent to grow us? That's one thing. The second thing, when I've previously looked at how social impact plays a role with employees and employer branding, attrition and retention is a huge conversation. I was speaking to you about a great study done by this organization, Benevity, which connects sort of a back-end technology system for giving and volunteering. They did this study across 2 million employees.
Wow.
And they found that actually there was a 57% reduction in employee turnover from those who did not engage in any giving or volunteering activities versus those that did engage in giving and volunteering activities. And that's real hard data. They work across all industries all across the globe at scale. So it was really interesting to see that really play out. And then I'd say that there are just obvious signals as well about employee engagement and how engaged people feel and to be part of a company. I think you might go on LinkedIn and you'll see people posting about their volunteer activities, or, it's great. We just got a day off to do this, and today we cooked for Oz Harvest. And employees are incredibly proud and more engaged when their companies are also engaged or facilitating these types of activities. And I think, if we just between ourselves, would we rather work for a company that gives back or doesn't give back?
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite an easy question.
Yeah. Well, for us, definitely.
Yeah.
And this is a change, because it's not always been like this. This whole notion of being a good corporate citizen hasn't always been. It's. I feel like right now it's expected. Yeah. Whereas maybe if you go back 10, 20 years ago, it's like, wow, they're really doing something different.
I think there's been a huge shift as well in how the world sees the actors that are needed to solve problems. Obviously, global problems like climate change or poverty, the governments themselves can't solve all the problems.
No.
Right? They need to work in concert with nonprofits, with the private sector. I mean, some of the things that I've learned about the private sector, the way that companies can influence and impact at scale, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story, a bit of a tangent.
Please. Yeah, please.
My first time working for Booking.com, largest travel company in the world.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about the technology sector. I knew nothing about how private companies give back. I was on my learning journey.
Yeah.
I sat down with my then boss, and she started talking to me about scale. And I don't know a lot about that. I don't even know what that word means. And I think at the time, Booking.com had something like 1 million bookings a day.
Yeah.
1 million per day.
Yeah.
She goes, imagine if we could just touch 1% of those bookings with a positive message or a positive action, or to do something, whether it's to book a sustainable hotel or whether it's to donate, to a charity every time you book. 1% of a million, what's that? 10,000.
Yeah.
Am I right? Is my maths right?
I think so. Yeah.
That's 10,000 people a day that company has a chance to influence. That's incredible.
Yeah, per day.
Per day.
Yeah.
And so then you, of course, scale that. They're growing. More bookings are growing. More touch points. And that's just one example of one company in one industry. And so the power of the collective organizations that can give back and make an impact, it's mind-blowing. Yeah. And I remember after I had that discussion with her, I thought, wow, like the power of an organization or a company to make change.
Yeah.
Wow, I'd never thought of something like that.
It's significant, because even in some recent studies that we had read, it showed clear signs. I can't give you the exact numbers, but they were saying there is an expectation from employees that there is an issue, a social issue that the employer is championing. Yeah. And that's really important. That's expected. It's not a nice to have, it's an expectation. This was a survey on current employees. Right. And that's the trend. And you're talking about Gen Z.
Yeah.
I think Gen Z is going to push a long way. And look, it's thanks to the other generations who have, laid the path, because I think there is a lot more that we've got to do. Like the world needs our help.
Yep.
So that brings me to this this question around leadership, right? People management, leadership. If you're thinking about your ideal leader, or what an ideal looks like, or the leader that you aspire to be, tell us about that person.
Yeah. There are a few things that come to mind straight away. I've always aspired to be, and I've always loved working with people who are completely transparent. Messaging is clear, expectations are clear. And there's no worrying about trying to interpret what I'm saying or what my boss might be saying.
Yeah.
Transparency in communications and expectations, I think is really important. I always try to aspire to be genuine.
Yeah.
And I want to have genuine relationships across my entire team. Because I think not every team will run super smooth.
Yeah.
You'll have those awesome, quarters where everything's just perfect. Then you'll have quarters where it's a bit tougher. And in those tougher times, having a genuine relationship with each member of your team helps you sit down and identify and solve problems together.
Yeah.
And so relationships have always been key for me, and also transparency.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I think those two things really build a high trusting environment as well when you have that. So no, that's awesome. We're going to move now to the Fast Five. So this is the section where we ask you 5 questions. It's an opportunity for us to get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready for this?
How fast is it?
No. It won't be lightning speed. But all right. First one. What was your first job and why did you get it?
Basketball coach. And the reason I got it is because I was captain of basketball at my school. And they had just this great program where they encouraged older students to coach younger students. And I started to coach, I think, under 14s or under 13s. Yeah, it was amazing.
Your skill.
Yeah.
What's something interesting that's not on your CV?
Which is funny because the question we ask is, what's something that's interesting that's not on your LinkedIn profile? That's what we ask every single new person. I eat an avocado every single day without fail. Very random. Yeah.
You must have a large supply of avocado. You buy by the box, don't you?
Every week I go out and I buy like 10 at a time and I plan it out. Yeah.
It's cool, man. That's good. That's good. Good for your hair. I heard avocado is. What have you learned about leadership and working on a team that you would want to teach your younger self?
You should never ask a team member to do something that you wouldn't try to do or haven't done yourself.
Can you provide a highlight from working in a trusted team?
The highlight, I would say just general fun. Like when you trust each other, you come into work and you just get things done and you have fun. And the highlight is, there's basically just no stress.
Yeah.
It's just having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in trying to do that. What would you like your legacy to be?
Beautiful hair. No, I think someone who always tried their best to make a positive impact. And that's what I'll continue to try to do. Yeah.
Well, you've done a lot so far, and I know you're keen to continue on that path. So, Tuan, thank you so much for coming on the HR Think Tank. It's been an awesome chat. Always great to catch up with you. I always feel inspired after speaking to you, and then you send us some resources, and then that just sends me down another path. But I really appreciate your time and coming in today with us.
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure, Kai. Love your podcast. Continue to support, and grateful to stay in touch with you.
Today's guest was the inspiring Tuan Pham, Head of Social Impact APAC at LinkedIn, the world's largest professional network with more than 830 million members in more than 200 countries worldwide. Their mission is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. We got insights into how we can all use social networks to support equality and how to advocate for corporate social responsibility in our workplaces. You can follow Tuan on his LinkedIn page, which we've linked in our show notes.
Thanks for listening to the HR Think Tank with Kai No. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share our podcast with your network. Check out the show notes for any resources mentioned in today's episode, or visit the Verify Now website for more information.